Good afternoon. We're back. Cody's here and our special guest talking all things GHD, Katie Hayes. Welcome, Katie.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You're a mainstay. You are a part of the show. You've been in our coaches development group. You've been on the show numerous times. And in fact, finally, someone at my level, level 4, that is. It's hard. I got to talk down to Cody and Fern as level 3s, right? Now I got someone we can do this thing. We can meet. We understand each other, and we're gonna talk
Jay,
all about that level 4.
I have surpassed you. The new level 4 means that I have surpassed you.
I don't. We don't need to get into it today.
hmm
Stand by my words. What's Shayna
Oh,
doing back there, Cody? What's
I
Shayna
don't.
doing? She's on the show. Your wife?
Yeah, she's on the show. She's on the show. There she is. Right. Anyways, I've never heard of a 5'2" person talking about it.
You're choppy. Go enjoy your vacation. Mute yourself
Jesus.
and drink your mimosas. Cody, where are you, Cody?
St. Lucia.
St. Lucia, 15-year anniversary with the wifey. There we go. Mike, that $10 right to you, Cody. Go buy yourself some drinks in St. Lucia. Take that money. Enjoy it. Let's talk about the GHD today, Katie. I have you on. Fern can't make it today, but we got, like I said, a level 4 in his place. Let's chat about the GHD. Cody disappeared. Let me ask you this, Katie. Do you remember your first exposure to the GHD?
I do. My first experience on a GHD was at CrossFit Jack's, the first gym that I was a part of for over a decade. And it was, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but the GHD was like, it was not safe. I think it was like handmade by Chris Russell.
Oh, the old back in the day. I mean, CrossFit Jack's old school. Chris and
This is
Megan.
like 2009.
You
Am I
could get
echoing?
no, not for me.
Okay.
Is she echoing, Cody?
Yeah, it is from you. Always from you.
It is always from you.
Oh, it's my. I'm echoing. How's that better?
Meh.
It's fine for now.
Better?
We'll see.
I gotta look over here. Look, when I turn profile, my nose looks bigger.
Look, all this money Mike has been donating. You think you could have gotten your setup?
Well, you're busy buying coffee with it. You're using all this money for coffee. So, no, back in the day, Katie, it wasn't like you'd go on Rogue and you'd have to find one from like an old college or high school.
Yeah, I think the military base sold a couple old ones that they just weren't using, or maybe they didn't sell it and Chris just acquired these GHDs. But yeah, I mean, they were really hard to find for sure.
You and I have both given the GHD lecture dozens of times, and we've both demoed as well. Nothing is worse than hopping on a GHD with like super like rigid pads on your quads when you're doing the hip extension and the back extension.
Yeah, and you just have to play it cool. Like everything's totally fine. Feels great.
Feels like someone's like giving you like a dead leg.
Yeah.
So let's break down the goal of this show. The purpose of the show today, explain what midline stabilization really means, how to develop capacity in that. Let's start there. Okay. How do we define midline stabilization?
So for us in CrossFit, we define midline stabilization as core strength. They're synonymous, right? They mean the same thing. And that's the ability for your trunk or your spine to resist flexion or undue overextension.
Textbook definition, and for a lot of people, if we're talking GHD sit-ups, they get on the GHD and they're like, oh, I'm not really feeling it in my abs in the moment, right? Yeah. Their psoas, their hips, their quads, whatever. But it's in that piece, like you just said, to resist undue flexion or extension. In the sit-up itself, typically it's resisting that overextension. And man,
yeah,
we've all been there. Like we've all used the GHD to the point that it's like, don't make me laugh. I'm not gonna breathe heavy today.
Like it's hard to get out of bed the next morning. Yeah, that isometric contraction, right, where your abs are just trying to stabilize and hold on to that position is really potent. For sure.
So when you got on that GHD for the first time at Jack's, do you remember if you were sore? Did your sister and Chris treat you right, or did they just let you get at it?
I think it's somewhere in the middle of those two things, because I think people weren't quite as educated about the GHD as we are now, potentially. And so while they showed me how to do a sit up and what the range of motion was, I don't know if there was as much, caution in terms of building up volume in a workout. So, I mean, I didn't overdo it. I've never hurt myself on the GHD, but I was extremely sore, 100%.
Yeah, I mean, I've never given myself rhabdo. I've been extremely sore, but I'd say when I owned Albany CrossFit, 3 to 5 people got rhabdo from GHD sit-ups.
Yeah, I know a handful that have as well. And I think of all those cases, it was usually somebody who came back and said, yeah, I think I did too much, or I put myself in a position where, I was really dehydrated, or I didn't work out for a month, and then I came back and my ego just overdid it. And they knew that.
Oh yeah. I never had somebody get rhabdo and be like, well, I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah.
It was always like, yeah, I did 200 GHD. I was, oh, have you been on here before? No. My first time. Okay.
Yeah. But I'm done. I got it.
You remember, I'm trying to think back. So I know at the original level 1s that I took, and then the original internships I had done, it wasn't the lecture we have today.
Yeah.
I don't even remember. Do you remember the first at my level 1, Castro gave it, Glassman was there, but Castro, I don't remember him doing, beginner movements, intermediate movements, advanced movements. Do you remember if that's the case?
I don't remember, only because, so I took my level 1 in 2010, and there was certainly a GHD lecture that broke down the different movements. But I think when Dave and Coach were still doing that, I don't know what the structure of that lecture was, or if it was more just like, here's what this piece of equipment is. I couldn't speak to that as well as you could, because you're just a lot older than I am, so I'm not really sure.
Did you mean to say smarter, or did you say older?
No, I got it right. Yeah.
Oh, you got it right. Yeah. So I remember I was at a level 1 interning. This is like 2008, CrossFit South Brooklyn. Chuck's there. Mm-hmm. And I remember he was giving the GHD lecture. And at the end, he's telling this story about his barber.
He still tells this story if he gives that lecture.
Oh, you tell it. You remember
it? Yeah, it was just about somebody who I think maybe had done a lot of like crunches or traditional sit-ups and thought, I'm fine, I'm going to be fine on this piece of equipment, did way too much volume, and then they had a job where they were on their feet all day long as a hairdresser or barber, and the swelling from their abdomen started to kind of make its way downstream.
Say it, and their balls and their testicles.
Yes, and they had some unfortunate swelling in the nether regions.
Yeah, you gotta scare some people. Like, hey, dude, your balls are gonna swell if you use this thing. But I remember, like, it stuck out. I still remember Chuck talking about that.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that story is like, it's supposed to highlight being cautious with the GHD, but I also don't think we should be scaring people into never wanting to touch it either. You know what I mean? There's a fine line of like, hey, be respectful and responsible with this thing, but also this is a great piece of equipment to utilize.
Yeah. And, I think it is something where you can gain capacity. So I hadn't been on a GHD in quite some time. Your balls might, Corey, they might become normal size. They might swell up to the handle.
That's all people are going to remember after this is just like, yeah, and my balls are going to swell. Thanks a lot.
Corey's going to go do it on purpose to try to get normal sized balls.
It does not feel good. It hurts.
So, no, you can gain capacity. I hadn't been on a GHD in about a year, and, we are lucky.
So last time you coached a class about the same time?
Yeah, I was doing the GHD while I was coaching. Okay. And we are very lucky. CrossFit, the office over here closed down, and they gave a lot of us trainers some equipment. I got like a brand new badass GHD now in the basement, and I've been doing almost 100 a day. I told you this actually, right? We worked together like a weekend ago, and I was really sore. I did 75, and now I've been pushing it to 100, and I'm like, I don't feel it. So you can gain that capacity quickly.
So you're doing 100. Or now you're up to 100 a day. What are the sets you're doing though? You're not just doing 100 for time or something silly like that.
So typically like to warm up in the morning, I'll do like a 30-minute, like just moving. So I'll just kind of make something up. I'll do like, for example, yesterday, I think it was, I did like 4 rounds of 2,500 meters on the bike, 25 sit-ups just to move in the morning.
Cool.
Warm up. But you know, for me, I was just like, I feel like my midline was lacking because I hadn't been doing any of them. So I liked it. Yeah, I like that, Joby. Look at this guy. He's so smart over here. So there's 4 movements that we talk about on the GHD. We'll break those down. And then, you know, let's also just talk about some other things like utilizing them at the box, how many a lot of affiliates have. But if we're talking posterior, so we've been kind of talking about the sit-up. Let's flip it over.
Yeah.
Posterior, we say the beginner movements, the hip extension, intermediate back extension, advanced hip and back extension. If you guys think back to your level 1, what we tell you is kind of develop 25, the capacity to do 25 under control. You want to pull those up, Cody. I see you got those. I'd say 99% of the time you see someone, this is Julie, she's doing a back extension right there. And that's actually the GHD that they gave me. There's a hip extension. Would you say 90+% of the time someone's working their posterior, they're doing a hip extension?
Yeah, I think that's probably accurate. I think, you know, we talk about this in the level 1 too. Especially if you see them in a conditioning style workout where the intensity is higher, most of the time people are going to default to the hip extension because you can move a little bit quicker and you're not losing your neutral spine position. So I think most people, that's the one they recognize. I think the back extension and the hip and back extension, maybe they don't get used because I think people might not know exactly how to execute correctly as well.
I think that's very true. It did not come with a Julie Fouché. But yeah, like for example, Filthy 50 says back extensions. No one does back extensions. And I think it's one of the things that, you know, like I think there's 2 things. One, the sit-up has a range of motion, right? At least in competition. Right. And we can break that down where it's like you touch something and we can talk about what full range of motion is for, you know, everyone else. But the hip extension and the back extension, we know there's an end range of motion. Hip extension, when you no longer maintain that neutral spine, but it's not like measurable, observable, and repeatable across people, even across yourself, because you're hopefully developing flexibility over time.
Yeah, agree.
So let's answer this for Joby.
Yep.
I know the answer to you. He knows the answer to this question, but so he just wants our opinion. He's just making it clear. He's smart. He knows. He knows. Why isn't the back extension considered the beginner movement? What do you think? How would you answer that?
Well, I think the hip extension is the beginner one because it mimics the other 9 foundational movements that we do, where your hip is dynamic, your trunk is static, or your back is static. And that's why we start there and then introduce that range of motion through the spine with the back extension.
Yeah, I think, you know, we often say like this should look like everything we often do is flexion of the hip while maintaining a neutral spine.
Yeah.
However, you know, and in addition to that, I'd say showing me you can do a hip extension shows me you have some prerequisite strength and capacity to now move on to a back extension, where the other, it's not necessarily in reverse.
And strength, capacity, and awareness. Like, how often do you have somebody get on there and as soon as they're in that plane and they start to try to move their hip, you see their back round right away because they just simply don't have the awareness of how to move those things independently. So yeah, I think that brings up a good point.
Well, and you bring up a point there too, where I think one of the criticisms of the GHD is just like, well, how do we use this in class? Because like you just said, like we talk about this in the lecture, there's a vernacular. If I tell Katie to flex her hip, she understands, extend her hip, she understands all that stuff, round your back, you know, extend your back. But we rarely see them in class just because they're real estate, they take up a lot.
Yeah.
And they are expensive when it comes, you know, comparable to other things. How have you best implemented these in the affiliates you've coached at?
Yeah. And I think this is such a valid point that should be talked about in the level 1 too, because I think it's probably universal that people don't have a lot of GHDs.
Well,
So it needs to be
while
addressed.
while you're going, you guys in the comments, rather than just talking about Julie Fouché and the GHD, I expect more from you, Nick. Nick, you are our mature listener. Comment how many GHDs are at your affiliate. How many GHDs are at your affiliate? If you're listening, let's hear. But go on with that, Katie.
So we incorporate them into things like warm-ups and cool downs, but that has to be written into the class plan and very intentional, because there's a big teaching component when it comes to the GHD. So what I'm not doing is just saying, okay, guys, here's your warm-up. If for the next 5 minutes, hop on the GHD and accumulate 20 hip extensions. It's a teaching moment. So I build in maybe 5 minutes of a lesson plan in a warm-up to teach. And then we might create like a little cycle where we have 3 GHDs. So we have 3 people start on the GHD. We have a group of people doing, barbell good mornings. We have some other folks doing couch stretch, and I create sort of a little cycle and we rotate through. And I set myself up at the GHD, and the other stations are kind of regulated, where there doesn't have to be a ton of teaching involved. And then if they're in a workout, I want people to get exposed to them in a workout, but it's like every round, I want you to do 5 hip extensions or 5 sit-ups to parallel. And then you're going to finish that round of reps with an AbMat sit-up or with a good morning. That I think that's how we start to expose people to earn the right to do a higher volume.
Yeah, because other than Anasan, who has 0 at his affiliate right now, 1, 2, 5, which is great.
5
Joby,
is nice. Yeah.
Yeah, at 5 you can pretty much implement. I've been to Roots. Roots has like 6, I want to say.
Yeah.
5, 6. Depending on even if you have a 15-person class, you can program in such a way that you can, whether it's EMOM or you go, I go. Like now we can start to implement in there. But I think most affiliates are probably doing it, and this is where it goes wrong. Like in Anasan's example, it's like we had one, we got rid of it because we never use it. But it's probably because with one you're never going to program. But like Katie just said, warm-ups and cool-downs, you should be using it consistently. And, one of the questions we had is like, in a given week, how often should we be using a GHD as a midline capacity building tool? I would say 1 to 2 times a week. What do you think about that?
I was going to say 1, just realistically, depending on your class sizes, the programming, etc. I think 1 is going to be way more than most people are probably using it right now. Once a week, getting people on there. So I think once a week is a great place to shoot for. Yeah.
And Joby, can you pull that comment up, Cody? How can you implement only one? We'll talk about that, Amanda. Glassman said this. I heard him say, something along those lines. If you don't have one, you should get one. I was at a Glassman 101 back in like 2008 or 9. He was touring the country, kind of just doing seminars. And one of the girls was we don't have one. We can't afford it. And he was like, I'm going to buy you one. And then I was like, oh, I can't afford one either. But
here's what else I can't afford.
But that's how adamant he was about it. And I agree. Like if you have an affiliate, a GH, it's like saying I don't have barbells or I don't have rings. It's like, CrossFit is an affiliate model. Cool. You don't need to own one, but it's certainly, an important piece that I think you should have. Let's talk about how would you implement you have 1 GHD. Have you ever coached at a box with 1?
No, I think in the early days of CrossFit Jacks, I think we had 2. I think we always had 2. So
let's walk through this, Amanda. So you have 1, and let's say you never have classes smaller than 8. What would you do?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Certainly not Cody drinking his mimosa offline. He's drunk already.
I would probably go so similar. This is just off the cuff. It's not the only idea. It's just the first thing I can think of.
Put you on the spot. You're level 4. You should get used to this. A lot of people are going to look up to you. They're going to be like, you're the real deal. Like,
Yeah. Thanks, Jay.
You're muted.
So
Cody, go ahead.
What he says pop quiz hot shot.
Who says that?
Who says that?
That's Fern.
Oh yeah, pop quiz hot shot. By the way, Did everybody watch Ted Lasso last night?
Was it the new season premiere?
Yeah, season premiere
Oh,
yesterday. Last night, you gotta go watch it.
I gotta get on it. Yeah,
You want to hop
so
off
good.
right now and go watch it? Come
Yeah,
back
I'll
in?
be back. Yeah.
Okay, so how would you implement one?
Yeah, back on track. So I'd go back to the idea that I talked about in the warm-ups where you create different stations, but I would have, depending on how big your class is, half of you are going to hit this in the warm-up and half of you are going to hit it in the cool down. So
Ooh, see, you already this is why you're level 4. If I'm gonna give you any, like, that's good right there. That's good.
Yeah.
You guys write that down. Write that down,
Jay.
everybody.
All right. So you can build in all your teaching on the front end, but then for those that don't get to hit it in the warm up, you build in 7 minutes after the workout in the cool down, and those 5, 6, 7 people or whatever that didn't get to do it can do it in the cool down.
Yeah, here's the thing I was going to ask you as well. It's one of the rare movements where every time we do it, we need to teach.
Yeah.
I mean,
I
unless
think so.
you look at a class and be like, all 8 of you have been on here, but back to this scenario, like, hey, you got 8 people, 3 of which have never been on it. Cool. Like maybe those 3 you're gonna do Supermans or you're gonna do hollow. Like just because we're using it like anything, there's it's universally scalable. Secondly, even if now that's their second time there, cool. Can you just hold the Superman position? Like we don't have to get them moving through it. The other thing I would probably do, and I'm sure you would do the same, it's like, hey, Katie, you're going to be with those 4 people in the warm-up. You've been on this, your experience. Make sure no one's going too far. So this is a good time to take your veteran members and give them a little responsibility.
Yeah, I think that's nice when you can do that and sort of task them with number one, demoing and making sure that you choose the right person to demo it, obviously, because it's that way you can talk and point, to different body parts as they're demoing. And then, putting them with some of the newer athletes and saying, just make sure that watch everybody's low back and make sure everybody's keeping that arch in their lower back. And it's just going back to the teaching point. It's just like anything else, building in a progression is going to build in your scaling options too, hopefully. So if you have everybody start with Supermans and then everybody start with good mornings, even PVC good mornings, and then, move on from there. And so if you're not comfortable in the GHD, just holding the Superman, no problem. We're going to just go back down to the ground and work Supermans from the floor. Yeah.
And, we can put targets there. We can spot each other. There's lots, and it's a good way to develop each other. It's funny because I was just thinking, I go to Lifetime. They have a really badass GHD, like top of the line. I've never seen anyone on it doing anything that resembles anything we teach. It's like like they're doing weird shit every time.
You should video it. Can you video some of that? Get some footage.
There's so much stuff I want to video at Lifetime, but Roz coach is there, so I don't want to make her look bad.
Don't ruffle any feathers. Yeah.
They're like going to a global gym is fun. Like you see funny. There's people like I do think over the last 15 years at I think Globo gym is offensive. So whatever words you're supposed to when I'm offensive, Globo gym, like it's evolved. Like more people are doing more normal looking things.
Yeah.
But there's always some craziness.
Yeah. I mean, look, more people in the gym, any gym, moving their body is a good thing. So yeah.
Brad Marshall, greater culture CrossFit. Is it did I say it right, Brad, or is it CrossFit greater culture? Do you think it is a movement that should be programmed at high intensity?
Which one? The hip extension?
Oh, good follow-up. Let's let him chime in on that. But in general, I mean, obviously we see the GHD sit-up done in intensity and the hip extension, but we were talking about, we rarely see. I've never seen a hip and back extension programmed of you.
I don't want to say never. Like I mean, I've maybe seen them on .com at some point. Don't you think?
How many judges can you name right here? Michelle Moots.
Michelle. Everyone looks the same with those hats on. Yeah.
That's Simon.
Maybe. Joe Maisley.
Russell.
Yeah.
Pablo.
Look at that range of motion. Woo.
Well, okay, Cody, you brought this up here. Let's talk about it, Katie. I know we're bouncing all over the place here. Range of motion on the GHD setup. This is obviously the CrossFit Games.
Mm-hmm.
they're probably doing weighted sit-ups. That's probably not their target.
No, I think they're holding that and touching the ball to the foot
So
pads.
clearly the range of motion here is the ball to the ground. But let's take a look at like this girl. Do you have any idea who this is?
Nah.
Right? Me neither. Cody, you know who that is? Can you look that up? Can you Google this girl? Who's that? So
Doesn't matter.
She's clearly overextended. Would we agree her body is not designed? That's like a crazy bridge right there.
Yeah. I mean,
because look, compared to this, let's call that makes me think it's Sam Briggs. I don't know why, but
could be.
That is like she's still got midline, but you guys can't see my arrow, can you? I'm like doing a whole like John Madden thing on this computer right here. The girl in the black, the second girl in, has like maintained neutral spine for the most part. Thanks, Cody.
That looks like an acceptable range of motion.
Right.
For
now,
her.
But let's be clear. This is the CrossFit Games. Everyone has to have a measurable, observable, repeatable range of motion that can be judged.
Yeah, that's it. There has to be a judging standard for competition.
That first girl, she's probably much. I mean, you can tell. Look how close, Cody. Go to the foot pegs. You could tell how close they are to the pads. That she's short, right? So she probably has to overextend. Well, I mean, they're close to the, and that's right, Matt. It's comp versus training. So while we're at this, Katie, tell everybody the range of motion their members should be hitting.
Yeah, I mean, we're looking to go basically just slightly past parallel. So at the bottom range of motion, if you freeze frame somebody, the shoulder should be slightly lower than the hip. But really the straight line from knee through hip through shoulder, that straight line is going to be perfectly acceptable for 99% of people. Anything beyond that is probably excessive. And to be quite honest with you, when I do GHD sit-ups, I go to about parallel, like in a workout, and that's plenty of range of motion for me too. And I still get the stimulus of a sit-up. Because if I do too many and I get tired and I go way past range of motion, it's not worth it. So just bringing the range of motion up is completely acceptable in training. Like there's no reason to touch the floor in training.
No, and for that reason, for everyone, you can use a soft box, like a crash pad, if you will, medicine ball, bumper plates, but raise that floor. We say it in the lecture, people come in different sizes, GHDs come in different sizes. That range of motion doesn't deviate. And if you really feel the need to give someone a target, put a target down there based on the fact that they're maintaining that neutral spine. And like Katie just said, shoulders below the hips. So let's go back to Brad's question. He had said, he was talking about any movement on the GHD, basically. Why do we not see many of them programmed at intensity?
I guess number one, I think for a long time, CrossFit.com was programming stuff on the GHD. So it's not that CrossFit is avoiding programming it. I think maybe affiliates avoid programming it for a couple of reasons, because they only have so many. So it's easier just to say, I'm not going to program GHD. And because maybe coaches aren't armed with enough information to dose people up responsibly. And I'm not putting that on the coaches saying, you should know better, but kind of, I mean, we should educate ourselves, and you have to take the extra step I talk to every individual person who's going to be on a GHD in a workout to talk to them about the volume, their range of motion. I want you to break the sets up in this many numbers. Like I have that conversation with everybody because everybody's tolerance is a little bit different. But yeah, I think it's just being apprehensive and not wanting to hurt anybody. I think probably that's why people avoid it. I don't think it needs to be avoided though. I think it's like anything else, a high skill movement. You don't have to avoid it. You just have to have lots of options in terms of a teaching progression to get people closer to being able to get on the GHD.
Well, and as you're saying that, I'm thinking for most people, their only exposure as far as coaching the GHD sit-up is a 25-minute lecture at their level 1.
Yeah.
Right. So what can we do to better educate? I mean, obviously it's in the manual, there's videos out there, but it is hard. Like you get one lecture, we don't really get on, we don't get on it at the level 1. And I think that's simply a byproduct of like, there's so much to cover. You know, we do touch on it, but you know,
sorry.
No, go on.
I think that as coaches, maybe the best way to start learning is we need to get on the GHD and start going through these progressions at different ranges of motion, different sets, different amounts of volume, so that we know and understand how it feels. And video yourself, whether you have somebody do it or you set up your phone, so that you can start assessing your own movement on there. Because that's a hard one to assess when you're on the GHD. You might think it looks a certain way, and then you watch it back and you're like, oh, wow, I didn't realize that that's where my body was in space. So I think we need to get on there and do a little bit of research ourselves so that we can be better prepared to coach people through it.
Yeah. On that note, you know, now that I have a GHD, one of my goals is to do 25 hip and back extensions
in a row.
No, over the course of the year.
Oh, I was gonna say
no, in a row. Like that is my goal.
Your goal is to do 25 unbroken, but it take a year to build up to
no. I was joking about the year. My goal is simply to do 25. It
that's
might
very well
take that's what we talked about at the level 1, and I've never seen anyone do it.
I mean, I think I want to say Kelly Jackson. I haven't seen her do it, but
I've heard rumors that Nadia used to be able to demonstrate it. So I mean, I know there are people that can do it, but
it's incredibly demanding and challenging.
Oh yeah, I mean, I do 1 or 2 in the lecture, and I'm like, oof, I feel that. I feel like if you pushed me, I can probably get to 10 right now.
Well, and if you do it intentionally, and not that it has to be slow motion, but it certainly needs to be controlled, the tempo. And if you do it at the correct tempo and intentionally hitting the pieces of flexion and extension at the right time, I mean, it's brutal. Yeah.
Prove it, Joby. Video yourself and send it in. If Joby does it, Cody, come on the screen for a second. If Joby sends it to us, we will put it on the best hour of their day YouTube channel.
What are you and you're gonna buy him a GHD, right?
$725.
Yeah, if Mike donates another $700. So Joby, Joby competition right now. Virtual, type in handshake if you agree. First to 25, slow and controlled. Let's go. What's the bet? What's the wager? All right, $50 wager. Mike's putting it out there. Who's in?
Do it.
Anybody that types in handshake on this episode is involved.
Look, if it happens, I'm gonna air it on the next breaking down the level 1 manual show. It's gonna be the first thing we talk about, right?
Yeah, no, we're gonna break this down. Type in handshake if you're in. Nick, Mike, Matt, Corey, whoever's in. Mike, you hold that $50 in escrow. First to get to front 25. Katie, you in?
No.
All right. Joby, give me the handshake. He's in. All right. Let's do it. That'll be fun. It'll give me a little challenge. Let's get back to some questions. We kind of talked about this? You know, do we really need to touch the ground on the GHD sit-up, or is breaking parallel good enough? I'd say for 99% of the people, breaking parallel. And personally, I think there are times where that's more challenging because you're really maintaining your midline.
Yeah.
Where you saw that picture of that girl there, like she's so overextended. Yes, unbroken, Nick Pierce, unbroken.
Well, and it's easier. I mean, in the moment, it's probably easier to just completely let yourself go backwards and touch the ground. You know what I mean? And just be loose in the midsection. But that's, that over time and the next couple days is going to just trash you for sure.
Yeah, Austin, when he gives a lecture, calls it like being a wet noodle.
Yeah, and that's what it looks like. Yeah, that's a great visual of full range of motion.
Right. Cody, put your cursor. Hips. Julie's hips. Yep. And then her shoulders straight down, right? So straight. Yeah. And if you look at that straight line, if we were to, chop that off and put her upright, It looks like your natural S curve. Slight extension,
Slight.
which is okay, right? But
Because
yeah.
her abdominals are still engaged.
All right, you're being
that she
creepy with
hasn't
the arrow
lost.
now, Cody. Stop it. You're being creepy. It's not that type of show.
Julie's
a friend
getting
of
a
the show.
lot. She's getting a lot of love on this episode.
She's a friend of the show. She's going to come on soon, right, Cody? When do we have a date for Julie Fouché yet? Wild Health?
We don't have a date, but she's coming on for sure.
Cool.
She's awesome.
Yeah, Julie rocks. So let's bring it to back to the AbMat. We haven't actually talked about the AbMat at all. We have no allegiance to the AbMat. I think the developer of the AbMat used to talk about packing sand under his back, doing sit-ups on the beach.
I think wasn't it a former Navy SEAL who really invented this just from doing sit-ups in the sand or on the beach? Yeah.
Yeah, when just talking about it, if you look at those pictures, do you have a preference? Thick side, thin side? Jenny, last seminar said thick side, and I think she actually said thin side.
I've heard it most of the time. I think people say put the thicker side up against your low back. To be completely honest with you, I don't know if it makes that much of a difference.
I don't think so. And most AbMats after like 2 years, they're so soft anyway.
Yeah. I don't think it.
You ever do sit-ups on a brand new AbMat? It feels like you're using a GHD.
Yeah, they're like super, super tough.
Significantly harder. So we talk about butterflying the feet. Let's discuss that. Why do we do that?
So butterflying the feet is primarily to task the job of sitting up to your abdominals and take your hip flexors out of the equation a little bit more. When your feet are on the ground, knees bent, pointed towards the sky, your hip flexors are going to help you sit up, just like they help in a GHD setup. So when you butterfly the feet, we're just removing the hip flexors a little bit and making sure that the abdominals are tasked with the majority of the work. That's all that is.
Yeah, and if you're unsure, we can look at two things. One, butterfly your feet without an AbMat, and you'll realize how much harder it is because your hip flexors aren't involved anymore, and you don't have that fulcrum to push off of. So great test there. Butterfly your feet. Don't use momentum. Just cross your arms like this guy was, and try doing a sit up. Hey. And you guys watching, as we wrap up, post any question you have on the GHD, on any of the movements for Katie and myself, and we'll dig into. So, Cody, will you flag some of those questions, and then we'll make sure we'll hit them all rapid fire style towards the end. What is the one thing most people get wrong about any of these 4 movements?
Oh.
So let's talk about each one. Hip extension. What do we typically see go wrong?
I would say people set up incorrectly. That could be true for all of them, though. That's probably a common fault with all of them.
So let's dig in. The setup for the hip extension, the hip and back extension, and the GHD setup are typically all the same.
Yeah, for most people, I think you're going to set your foot pads in the same spot for all 3 of those. The back extension is what's going to be different.
Right. So looking at Julie in picture A, and really all of them, but A specifically, you can see that her hips are free and clear of the pad because in this, her trunk is going to stay static and her hips are going to be dynamic. So she needs to have space to flex at the hips. And then that's going to be the same for the hip and back extension. Cody, find the back extension. Cool. So now you'll see that she's moved the foot pegs back. So her hips are further back on the pad to trap her hips because now her hips are going to stay static and her trunk is going to be dynamic. So she's trying to lock that in place. And then I assume the next picture down, Cody, is the hip and back extension. Yeah. So you see again here. Let's walk through it. So Katie, walk them through this, please.
Okay. So for the hip and back extension, it starts in that Superman position. The first thing you see her do is she kind of tucks her chin and starts to round out her back 1 vertebrae at a time, starting up the cervical spine through the thoracic spine. And then we go down all the way down to that lumbar curve. So she's completely flexed at the spine. Once she's at that end range of motion, she re-extends the spine. Yep, right there. So now she's in trunk extension. To reverse this, she's going to go back to trunk flexion. And you'll notice that the hip is now open. So the hip was closed, the picture before. Now the hip is open and her back is flexed and she regains extension all the way through to the top.
Yeah, so that's what we're looking for. Under control. Oftentimes this is slow because we're doing it under control. How long do you think the average hip and back extension should take?
5 to 6 seconds.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was going. So that means if we're doing 25, we're taking over 2 minutes.
Are you going to grab the handles to rest at any point? Not like, you know what I mean?
Joby probably will. I won't. That's cheating.
Oh man,
It's
it's gonna
resting.
get so tough.
That's like saying, are you going to put the bar down while you're going touch and go? Like you are, but that you're no longer going unbroken.
You cannot do it that way.
Oh, I can't wait.
So, yeah, and let's talk setup on the GHD while we're at it, right? We kind of wrap up the GHD lecture with like, hey, people talk about their back hurts, and a lot of times it's so pull those pictures up. None of you want the $50. I love it, Mike. That's it.
Look at James' haircut. It's such a fresh haircut.
James looks the same. So, Jen Hunter Marshall would say biscuits off the pad.
Yeah, that's critical. And I think on this one, that's one of the most common faults is just that people don't set it up correctly. And if, with her hips off the pad like that, that gives her hips room to move, which needs to happen. Because if the hip is trapped and it can't be dynamic, that means that all the dynamic movement will be in the spine or in the trunk, which is what we don't want.
And then what's the other way that people will tell you their back's bothering them?
In the sit-up specifically?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think just doing too much range of motion. They're trying to extend too far.
Yeah, too far. But then also, wouldn't you say if they don't rapidly extend the knees?
Oh, yeah, sure. Like over a big amount of volume, I think if you don't extend the knees, and there was a question about this too, maybe we could hit on that.
There we go, Mike's. I'll pull it up. Cody?
Yeah, that when you rapidly extend the knee, and use your hip flexors to help sit up, it's going to be faster. You're taxing more muscles and bigger muscles with the work, which is what we want to do. So over time, if you don't do that, it just means that not that your psoas isn't, or your rectus femoris isn't working, but your psoas is probably being taxed more than it should be, which is, attaches to your lower back. And so potentially over a big amount of volume, that could lead to some discomfort in your low back.
Yeah.
So, go ahead. Well, Mike's question about, like I have athletes who will try to save their legs a little bit if it's like a very leg intensive workout and they don't want their quads to burn up on the sit up. I think that's a strategy thing and it's fine. But over time, if that's always the way they're doing it, we just have to be aware of, the potential discomfort that could lead to. And it's slower. It's just slower when you don't extend your knee.
Yeah. Makes sense for a games athlete if we have 800 or 185-pound lunges. Remember we did that event this year, right? So it's like, I know my legs are going to get shot. It's okay that I'm putting this on my back. Like,
yeah.
Right, if you're strategy thing. Right. And this goes back to, the task at hand. We've talked about this before. Most of your members, Mike, are not good enough to be doing something poorly on purpose. In other words, it's a lightweight on the squat clean. Cool. Still, I need you to open your hips because you're not good enough to know when you are and aren't. You're not a games athlete who's purposely shorting movements because of other things going on. Before we get to, I see Cody has a picture of what looks to be a glute ham raise. Let's just touch on rhabdo one more time. GHD sit-up is one of the most easy ways to give someone rhabdo just due to that eccentric loading. So for that reason, we talk about in the lecture, prove to me you could do 25 AbMat sit-ups and not with your arms flailing, slow and controlled. Prove to me that you could do 25 to parallel. And even then, see you, Joby. The bet is on, Joby. Let's go. And then prove to me you could do 3, 5. Let's build up over time. But it should not be a test. You should not have to, prove that you could do 25 and give yourself a rhabdo. Develop capacity over time.
Yep.
Unless you're Corey and you want your balls to swell, don't do that. All right.
let's not end this show on swelling balls. We gotta end it a different way.
That's how we end every show. We talk about swelling balls. Cody, pull that picture up of Mr. Hobie doing there we go. You don't see this often.
Mm-mm.
Are you familiar with this movement, level 4?
Yeah, the glute ham raise.
Yeah. I mean, rarely see this.
Yeah.
But what a great way to develop hamstring.
Totally. Oh, they're very challenging and demanding on the hamstrings. I guess I can't speak from like, this isn't level 1 content speaking, but just, we introduced the 3 movements for the posterior side of the GHD, just like we introduced 9 foundational movements. Could we add movements? Sure, because there's tons of movements that we don't necessarily cover in the level 1 that are extremely valuable, but the hip extension and the back extension are a little bit more beginner. And again, the hip extension mimics so many other movements that we do. The GHD setup where we're extending the knee and using the hip flexors to sit up. Like, again, that's a very common motor pattern that we're using. And so I don't think there's anything wrong with this at all. I think add it to your repertoire if you gain capacity in the other ones first, I would say.
And but I think you kind of nailed it. Like the hip extension, the back extension, even, we talk about the hip and back extension. It's like someone rounding their back on their deadlift.
Yeah.
And they lift their chest and regain that neutral spine under flexion of the hip.
Right.
This is not, I don't want to say it's a non-functional movement, but it's not a movement you're probably going to do often in life.
It maybe is not as natural, right? We talk about that when we talk about
where you're really going to load that hamstring up.
Yeah.
Right. And flex at the knee. So,
right.
We just don't see it. But again, that doesn't mean don't do it. Be developing, be learning everything. We just don't cover it at the level 1. Cody, before we wrap up, let's bring up some questions. What do we got still? All I see is swollen balls from Brian Boucher. Tips for folks who find the motion of GHD to make them a little dizzy. Pretty common. What do you tell people to do? I tell them to stop being a baby and keep going.
So there's answer number 1. I'm going to give you a much better answer. And I think that is, don't swing your head back and forth. Like, you don't need to whip your head back. You can tuck your chin and try to find a focal point on the wall or the ceiling in front of you and keep your gaze there. And that's going to help a lot with the dizziness.
Yeah. I mean, 2 answers that are, man, first of all, let me tell you a story. Madison loves spinning now. She says, dizzy. And I spin her, and then I'm like, I'm dizzy. Like, I can't, I don't know what happened. All of a sudden, like 3 spins, and I'm like, I'm going to throw up. So, but one thing that, like you said, Katie, it's like, pick a spot in front of you and try to eyeball that every time you come up. Here's another tip. This is a level 4 tip. You write this down, Katie. You're going to want to write this down. Chew bubble gum.
What?
See?
Why?
Thinking. Because
what the heck is that?
A lot of times they're clenching their jaw, and by chewing bubble gum, it keeps your jaw a little more relaxed.
So then you can choke on your gum as you go upside down.
Yeah, it's a choking hazard, but you're not going to have a headache.
Okay, great. There you go.
No, but it really does work. That's for like anyone. Whenever someone's like really clenching their, you're grinding their teeth in workouts. Everyone's wearing these mouth guards these days. Chew gum. Chew some bubble gum. I'm here to chew bubble gum and kick ass. And guess what? We're all out of bubble gum. What else we got, Cody? Any other questions?
No, that was you answered the other one that we had. She went in depth and captured the other one. I do have a question though. Let's say somebody doesn't have a GHD and you still want to try to capture some of that range of motion. What about a Bosu ball? Would that work?
Question.
First you can use a medicine ball too,
or an exercise ball, right?
First of all, the founder of the Bosu ball, David Weck, friend of the show, he's been on. Good guy. Go check him out. I got one in the. First of all, when people say Bosu ball, they're typically referring to the ball. The Bosu ball, I forget what it stands for, is the one where the ball has the flat surface on the bottom.
Yeah.
Right? But you can do that there. What are some other ways you've created that range of motion, Katie?
We've used medicine balls, and then typically you're going to want some dumbbells to anchor your feet for this one. But take a heavier medicine ball, a 20-pound medicine ball, sit on it, not directly on top, but you do have to kind of slide your hips forward a little bit, anchor your feet on those dumbbells, and then you can go back. And that will give you a little bit of that, slightly past parallel range of motion that mimics the GHD sit-up.
Well, let me walk you through another one. No one's going to do this one.
Chew bubblegum.
Chew bubblegum. No, I mean, jiu-jitsu, we do this. So you guys familiar with the position of guard?
No.
So imagine this. You're lying on your back. You're lying on your back, Cody. I'm going to use Cody as my example because it'll get weird with Katie. You're lying on your back, and then I get between your legs, and you wrap your legs around me.
Oh, yeah, you're totally right.
Hey, that's why I didn't use you, Katie. Got it?
Yeah.
I roll with women all the time, though. And then our legs are wrapped around me. You could do a big sit-up. Don't do this at your cross.
I was going to say, now we're talking about some liability issues, maybe, the affiliate.
HR to be, I think probably even just talking about it with Cody, I broke some HR rules.
Yeah.
If anybody does this, we need to get tagged in this. I got to see this.
You're going to be hearing about this later.
If Roz wasn't pregnant, I'd have her do it tonight. But no, it's a good drill if you want to do that. Hey, one thing we didn't talk about because it's not part of this is reverse hyper, right? We're not going to talk about that anywhere else in breaking down the manual. I want to get one. I used to have one back when I lived in New York. I got to get one down here. It's one of the best things I've gotten to really heal up my low back. Have you guys ever used one?
I've heard people mostly using it for rehabilitation stuff. And I've heard say we don't have one, unfortunately. We did at CrossFit Jax, and that's where, again, it takes up a lot of space, so it's hard to store. But a lot of people would use it for rehabbing. Not even just like big injuries, but just little tweaks here and there with their low back.
Yeah, I mean, R.I.P. Louis Simmons, right? But he's the one that created it, and he created it to heal a broken back. He literally broke his back, and what he found was for reverse hyper, and I bring it up because there's plenty of ways you can kind of mimic this as well. And you're letting your legs swing, and it opens up that low back, provides blood flow to that lowest part, like that sacrum. And there's a couple. There's a West Side version on Rogue that I'm probably going to buy because you can fold it up. What I found with the reverse hyper is you just want to leave it loaded over in the corner, so you just hop on it. That's the Rogue version, which is freaking badass. If you pull up the Louis Simmons version, it's like 400. I've been looking at them. It's like 475.
Yeah, I mean, Corey's talking about they had one, got rid of it because it was mostly used for storage. If we're talking about what's the most necessary in an affiliate, what are people going to get the most use out of? I don't know if this is something I would right away spend money to get in the gym.
Certainly not. And that's the reason I don't have one down here is it's kind of like what movie's on in the back? Someone's watching. Then Cody's wife is watching TV. It's I think both the GHD and the reverse hyper, the issue is it's not that they just take up real estate. It's that they take up real estate for one movement only.
Yeah.
Right. It's just like, it's going to sit here and we're only going to use it when we use it. And there's no easy way to store it. So, I'll probably get one once Roz lets me get rid of one of her Pelotons so I can put it over there.
Good luck to you.
She's not going to let me do that. Cool. Well, any other questions, comments, Cody or Katie or listeners on, is it listeners or watchers if we're on YouTube, Cody?
Listeners, watchers, people in the chat. I don't know, whatever you want to call it.
You got 2 level 4s on here right now. Anything you want to know, I'll give you guys 3 minutes, anything coaching related, because we are wrapping up the breaking down the level 1 manual. We have one more episode next week where we're kind of going to go through those back pages, the trainer agreements, etc. But then, this is breaking news, Cody. We're going right into breaking down the level 2 manual, and we've got some amazing guests already lined up. We've got Pat Barber, Joe DeGain, Steve Haydock, and many more coming on. Wow. So we're going to keep the show rolling right into the L2 manual. So thoughts on the box ad on GH? I've never seen it.
I'm not sure what that is. Yeah,
there's a GHD piece that sits on the box.
I see. Yeah, I have seen that.
I think it's probably good if you had like storage to put them in between. But my guess, Nick, would be it's probably not going to get used because it's probably a pain in the ass to strap it on a box. So you're better off just buying a GHD that's going to sit over in the corner. What is a major difference between L3 and L4 professionally? Well, typically the L4s are the most professional out there, I'd say. Would you agree with that, Katie?
Based on what? Based on your like behavior or what?
Somebody told me yesterday I was 44 going on 13. Is that good?
It depends on your definition of good. I think if maybe if I'm not understanding the question correctly, you can correct me, Amanda. But if you mean professionally, like opportunities professionally, I'm not sure in terms of. I think what CrossFit's working really hard on right now is creating opportunities for people who are furthering their credentials in CrossFit based on that continuing education. And so I guess I can't speak to specific examples of what that means, but I know that that is something that the education department at CrossFit is working really hard on to incentivize people. Caring about getting better is one thing, and you have to care about wanting to get better, but incentivizing, why should I want to do this? What does that mean for me professionally? So I wish I could give you a more solid answer, but I know that that is something that is being worked on all the time.
Yeah, and let me chime in, and then we'll answer Brad's question before we wrap up. I'll say this. I don't know how you feel, Katie. The L3 is freaking still outstanding and prestigious, but the further along we get, the more people that are going to have it. If someone showed up to my affiliate with the level 4, it's like, oh, damn. How much do you want? I'm hiring you. And I would probably say that's the same for the L3 to this point. But at some point, it's like, cool, you passed a written test versus like, oh, you do this thing really freaking well.
Yeah.
And I would guess, like, obviously Fern can coach his butt off and many other level 3s can. But, like, you've actually gone through an assessment. People have watched you coach. And they're like, oh, you're the cream of the crop.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. I mean, hopefully, and obviously there could be affiliate owners out there that are like, well, we only want level 1 coaches right now because maybe that's all we can afford to pay or whatever the case might be. So, but I think you're right. I think if you have a level 4, you should be able to hopefully go to any CrossFit gym that's hiring and say, this is it. Like, this is my stamp of approval, and I've earned the right to hopefully walk into any gym and be able to coach any group of people.
And for the record, I think the level 3 holds that currently too. If you show up at the level 3, it shows me
it's a hard test. Yeah.
2 hours and you know this thing and you've been doing it long enough. All right. Last question from Brad. You answer this one, Katie. How do you balance the athletes who made quarterfinals this weekend with the classes you already have scheduled with floor layouts, due dates, etc.?
Oh, yeah. This is a hard one. So I guess based on personal experience, we've had a couple, maybe 2 or 3 athletes qualify for quarterfinals in the last couple of years. And we have 147 other athletes who didn't qualify. And so it's the regular classes and the members, the bulk of the members, that's the priority. It has to be. And while they think it's cool, the quarterfinals are cool, and they want to support their fellow athletes. It's got to be done outside of class time. It can't take, I'm not letting people do their quarterfinals workouts in a corner while class is going on. That's too distracting. It's not fair for the members. So it has to be set up outside of class times. And that's up to you as a gym owner, as a coach, if you're willing to come in outside of your hours and help them set up the layout and make that work. But I think the members, that's the priority. The class is the priority for me. That's my personal opinion.
I agree with you 100% on that one, right? And that should be period. Class takes priority. Cool. That was great, Katie. Thank you so much for coming on. Cody, we got the progression tomorrow?
Progression tomorrow.
You going to be there with this crappy internet?
I'll be there.
I want you to be drunk on mimosas before you show up. That's a directive, Cody.
A directive. All right.
Cody doesn't like getting directives, Katie.
You want me to do what?
And no affiliate hot seat Friday, and that show is actually moving to Mondays. Is that correct?
Yeah, we're gonna have one more that's on Thursday, but we're gonna have a Monday, Thursday, and then all Mondays from there on.
So coming soon, Monday's affiliate hot seat, Wednesday breaking down the L2 manual, and then Thursdays we got the progression. So stay tuned. Those of you that agreed, We'll see you in the hip and back extension challenge. $50 on the line. $50 on the line. No touching the handles. First to get there, Mike Caputo is gonna be the big prize. I can't wait. I'm definitely gonna beat Joby and Nick at this. I'm excited to have a little challenge in my life. Katie, you're the best. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Have me on for one of the L2 episodes as well.
Awesome.